when was the New York State budget due?
The fiscal year ended on March 31st.
On March 31st, and I noticed that we adjourned, Mr. Speaker, before midnight on the 31st, actually early in the afternoon with about 11 hours to spare. We all gabbled out and left this chamber. Through you, Mr. Speaker, why is the budget late at this point?
There are negotiations that are taking place, and though things were getting close on the 31st, we weren't there yet.
Through you,
And
Mr. Speaker.
we're not quite there yet either, but we're just about.
I, as ranker on the Higher Education Committee and an active member in this legislative body, I participated in every budget hearing that I was invited to, many of them with great dialogue with you, Madam Chair. How many public hearings did we have between March 31st and today?
As you know, the budget hearings started the week after the governor presented her budget. We had 13 hearings. You're right, you sat through a large number of them. They were average 10 to 12 hours each, so we had more than 100 hours of hearings on the budget.
I'm sorry, I don't think I heard an answer to my question there. Through you, Mr. Speaker, I asked how many public hearings did we have on the budget between the March 31st at midnight deadline and today?
We didn't have hearings then because we held hearings according to the Constitution and legislative requirements after the governor's budget is presented.
How many public hearings are scheduled between, and this is, for the record, this is a bill that will extend the period from April 1st, the deadline, to April 7th, so to kick it out a week. How many public hearings are scheduled between now, April 4th, and April 7th, so that the public can know what's being negotiated into this budget?
Well, there aren't hearings scheduled because now we're having the negotiations based on, in large part, based on what we heard at those hearings that we did have in January and February.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, and I just wonder, one final indulgence. I noticed that a number of major issues, whether it be on bail reform and the governor's leaked 10 points on bail reform, or whether it be on a taxpayer-funded stadium, have been put out in the public realm as budget negotiation pieces. I was wondering, at what point is the public going to hear about those negotiations before we vote on a final budget? When will their input be allowed in this process?
We have had, as I said, we have had the public input during the hearings. Some of the comments were certainly all the comments will help guide us as we prepare our final budget, and there will be opportunity once the bills are printed for people to see. But certainly, as you say, there have been some issues that have been in the news, in the public domain, and I'm sure many of our colleagues have heard from our constituents about those issues that are reported in the news.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll go on the bill.
On the bill, sir.
New Yorkers obviously deserve an on-time budget. They deserve a budget where elected officials that are leading the process probably should inform them about the major issues that they're negotiating, and they don't have to turn to Twitter to find out what the latest in the budget process is. They deserve a budget, Mr. Speaker, that is negotiated in good faith as a public, open process as outlined in the Constitution. They don't deserve having a legislature negotiate in secret with 3 persons and 1 party in a room. A budget that was due last week. And we actually, if you remember, Mr. Speaker, I gave accolades because at the beginning of last week, there was a bill that was brought to the chamber floor, and it was the first budget bill. It was a debt service bill. We talked about paying the minimum on our credit card bill as New York State, and it actually had enough age in this chamber for the public to see it, for us to discuss it and digest it. And it was brought to this chamber floor without a message of necessity of the governor, so they didn't subvert even the legislative process, which was a good thing. And then what's happened over the last week? Well, we shut down early before the budget deadline, 11 hours before the budget deadline. We gavelled out in this chamber, we quit. They sent us home. They said, no, we're not even going to try for an on-time budget anymore. And then we stand here today. After coming back, we debate a number of bills that have absolutely nothing to do with the most pressing issue right now, which is this budget, which is already beyond its deadline. And the next budget bill that we take up is one to kick the budgetary can down the road, to say, well, we haven't made enough decisions behind the public's back yet, so we can't deliver a budget to you today. So we're passing this with a message of necessity from the governor. I will give accolades because at 5:20 p.m. at least, New Yorkers are still awake today to hear this conversation. I hope that at least continues. I would love to see some budget bills with enough age so that the public can digest them. It would be wonderful if, in the spirit of the New York State Constitution, these bills also had enough public input so that the public and the legislators that represent them in both the Senate and the Assembly have the opportunity to comment and adjust. But I understand we're beyond that. It's April 4th now, Mr. Speaker, so I won't take up any more time in this chamber, but I urge my colleagues to think about this long and hard, and I want you to think about what happens when they miss the next deadline, which they've given themselves until April 7th. How do you vote on that bill? Do we also plan to kick the can down the road? And obviously, Mr. Speaker, I want to see New Yorkers get paid. We did the debt service bill before saying we're going to pay the minimum on our credit card. And now we're taking up this bill today to say, hey, we shouldn't stop payroll. And I know that this is going to pass, and that's a good thing because we don't want to see employees in New York State miss their payroll. It's also including a couple of bills that New York State are coming due for New York State in the next couple of weeks, whether it be in Department of Health or OPWDD, and we should pay our bills. But think about what happens when the next extender comes and what that does to the process and the lack of openness and transparency when a governor who is the same party as both legislative leaders took office and said, I'm going to be the most transparent, and we haven't had a public hearing in weeks about what's being negotiated in secret in this budget. With that, Mr. Speaker, I'll conclude my comments. Thank you.